Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in a minute. You want to put up the presentation? Okay. All right. Well, welcome, everyone, to our 82 Alliance Global webinar. My name is Rob Henry. I'm the president of the 82 Alliance, and I'm very excited today to have our speakers joining us to talk about the things that are going on in their countries and the programs they're working on. Um, The 82 Alliance today, well, let me do our intro for speakers first. Sorry. So very excited to have Lisa Martin, a director at Steer, joining us. So Lisa will be speaking first today, and Lisa has over 30 years experience in transport planning. She specializes in delivering sustainable mobility through design and implementing travel behavior change strategies and programs that involve education, incentives, and infrastructure interventions. She has advised local, regional, and central government, as well as private sector clients across a broad spectrum of behavior change studies. At Steer, she has led teams and supported clients delivering projects in the UK, US, Canada, and Australia. She is passionate about sharing good practices and applying those to local settings. Lisa's expertise includes airport surface access and ground transportation. She has worked with airports in the UK and the US to facilitate safe, convenient, and sustainable journeys by passengers and employees to airports. She has experience working directly for the airport, Heathrow Airport Limited, as well as in consultancy roles. Lisa will be followed by Lizzie Thal-Jantzen, who is a principal transport officer at Bristol City Council, home to 500,000 residents and the largest city in the west of England. For 12 years, Lizzie has worked on the development and delivery of engagement to meet a range of city and regional plans, including supporting business resilience during infrastructure improvements, delivering support to new movers at housing developments, exploring the potential for health benefits from encouraging walking as part of a wider public transport journey, working with businesses to prepare staff for the introduction of paperless ticketing as part of the launch of Metrobus, Bristol's new express bus service, and providing outreach support to businesses before implementation of a residential parking scheme, and also promoting electric mobility. As part of her work, she manages a team of travel advisors who engage directly with individuals, businesses, and community groups. And after Lizzie, we'll have Luke, and Luke Ward has 15 plus years of experience delivering innovative, sustainable transport solutions across global markets. Currently serving as head of MENA region at Liftango, he specializes in the strategic design and execution of future-ready mobility systems. His career spans strategic consultancy, digital innovation, and large-scale project delivery within all types of infrastructure and transport across the UK, EU, MENA, and APAC regions, translating transformative concepts into tangible, real-world outcomes, driven by a commitment to decarbonization and user-centered mobility. Luke enjoys playing a key role in shaping the next generation of connected, efficient, and inclusive transport networks. So those will be our speakers for today, and we're very excited to have them. So thank you again for taking the time out of your day for doing that and for speaking today. I want to go over quickly a few things about the 82 Alliance. So who's the 82 Alliance? So we're a nonprofit 501(c)(3) located in the US. We're a think tank that brings together experts and change makers to drive real world solutions. Um, we're created really from the belief that people, places, and possibilities thrive when we reimagine how we move. And this has all really been driven since the pandemic and as we look at some of our global challenges and our climate being probably the biggest global challenge that we have as it relates to mobility, it's important that we learn and grow and thrive together. So that's really who we are. Next slide. And so we are a membership association. So why join? We're a firm believer we're stronger together than apart. We really love connecting with like-minded advocates, leaders, and visionaries. We really want this to feel like you're talking to your friends, you're communicating with people that you enjoy communicating with and being a part of. We really want to drive meaningful change in your community and beyond. So we're looking at impact and how can we advance mobility challenges and learn from one another. we're doing this really for the planet to reduce emissions and protect the environment. We're at kind of an existential point in our climate and our planet, and we want to make sure that we are have this for many, many hundreds and thousands of years, so future generations can enjoy this beautiful planet that we have. And then for the people, for improving quality of life for all. Many suffer from many different ailments and issues and lack of mobility, and how can we help those people to provide upward mobility and connectivity so they can all thrive and have wonderful, productive lives. And next slide. So membership, it's relatively inexpensive. So we have an advocate level for $250, and we have a supporter level for $125, and those just help us do the work that we're doing here and putting on events and other activities, and also help with matching funds for potential research projects. Next. And if we are hosting an in-person event in Nashville, Tennessee, November 12th and 13th. Very excited about that event. That all the information for that event is on our website, which is 82alliance.com. You can find information to register. We have a lot of really dynamic speakers focusing on all aspects of mobility from the Nashville area, but also across the U.S. and beyond. We have a keynote speaker, the former mayor of Austin, Texas, who's going to talk about some of the things that they've done as far as innovative strategies in Nashville. We have large corporations like Amazon. We have universities like Vanderbilt University, Penn State University joining us to speak. We'll be focusing on the integration of AI, women in transportation. So lots of different aspects of that conference where the emphasis is on mobility. And we'll be excited to have you there if you can join us. So early bird registration ends September 15th. That conference, as I mentioned, is November 12th and 13th. So hopefully we'll see you there. Next. And two things at that event. Last year we started our first A Better Tomorrow Awards, and these were awards that were given out to communities, corporations, organizations that we felt were working to advance mobility and creating a better tomorrow for all. And this was a really gratifying award to give out. And our goal is to grow that year over year and continue to expand that, and hopefully it can continue to grow globally as well, and recognize those that are doing that good work and help to develop a standard, but also an opportunity to share best practices with others that are doing that. So that'll be our second annual Better Tomorrow Awards that we'll be giving out in Nashville. And then our last piece is we will be giving out our first ever Emerging Mobility Champions under 40, and this is to recognize young professionals that are under 40 and help them to grow. We've been doing this in another organization for years on a local level, and it's been really gratifying to see people come back years later and say thank you for that recognition that helped either keep me in the industry or continue to advance my career. So just really believe in helping to recognize people. So there's that. And now I'm going to turn it over to Lisa to talk a little bit about what the work she's doing at Steer.
Great, thank you, Rob. A really nice introduction there, and I was reminded what a small world we work in. I think I saw my colleague Alia from our New York office receiving one of those awards there, but that was fun. So thank you, those of you who's joined us today. When I was first asked to speak on sharing some good practice from the UK, I sort of racked my brains a little bit to think, well, what might be relevant, what might resonate with a primarily American audience. And actually, I thought about telling the story of the work that's been ongoing in the West of England now for nearly 20 years. I first got involved over 20 years ago, and I reached out to sort of former colleague Lizzie and said, how about it? And she was up for it. So I'm really excited that most of the talking this afternoon on that project we're going to leave to Lizzie. She's involved in the sort of day-to-day of all of that now. But I thought I might just set the scene a little bit for how, if you like, TDM almost came to be in the UK, and the sort of background of how that project got started. So just moving on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So a little bit of a potted history of, as I say, we don't really use the term TDM so much in the UK. So behavior change or smarter choices has been something which is much more commonly referred to as the sort of work that TDM might comprise in North America. So way back in the 1990s, more akin to some of the commuter programs in the States, we had our first workplace travel plans and school travel plans emerge in the UK. And that was something very much led by the Department for Transport. Essentially, at the time, the whole concept of could there be a site-specific plan which intends to reduce use by car of those travelling to that site by work. They could either come forward voluntary, and that was really what the emphasis was on. How could we get organizations to realize they would benefit from developing these plans? Or they might be required through the development process if someone was planning to expand their site or put in a new site. So I've said federal here to make it clearer, but really our central government, we don't have a federal government, supported a program of site-specific advice where trained consultants, transport consultants went in and gave this specific advice to different organizations. And that then led to a set of best practice guidance. At the same time, there were some early pilots of community-based travel planning, might have been called personal travel planning, trip diaries, travel blending, social marketing being piloted in towns across the country. Really small pilots. We were starting with, 100 households or a target of 100 at a time. So into the early 2000s, things seemed to be going quite well. We evolved into much larger programs of personal travel planning projects targeting thousands of households at a time. Our central government funded the Sustainable Travel Towns and Demonstration Towns, and I'm going to say more about that on my next slide. And that led to more funding, quite a lot more funding for behaviour change interventions. There was recognition that this could be an area of work that could have real impact in the UK in reducing car dependency. And that fund launched in 2010 and was really quite widespread and supported local authority work for the next 15 years. So just looking at the next slide, please. This just highlights the findings of those sustainable travel towns. So 3 towns were chosen. They jointly received $10 million. So that would be about 13.5 million US dollars. Bear in mind, this was back 20 years ago now. So the levels of funding in the UK have never been as large as those that are available in North America. But the opportunity was for those 3 towns to really think about a collection of measures which were on, if you like, the softer side. They were about branding, awareness, encouraging, incentivizing, and not so much about infrastructure. They were about supporting infrastructure. And there was a very thorough evaluation conducted alongside those 3 towns to really test whether this concept that had been being done in quite small pockets really worked when you put it at that town level. And you can see there that there was a reduction across the 3 towns in total traffic levels in the order of 2% and a reduction of 7 to 10% in the number of car driver trips per resident. Really quite startling and quite groundbreaking results. And you can see there as well the benefit cost ratio of 4.5 to 1. So standing up unbelievably well against other transport investments. And I've included this very small snippet here at the side of a letter from the Parliamentary Undersecretary of State at the Department of Transport to all local transport authorities. And the bit I've highlighted says the results are startling. And that really was the mood music in the country at the time, that this was a new way of work going forwards. So just moving on to the next slide. Thank you. Just now moving on to then what was great at Bristol. So alongside this programme of emerging funding, the idea of cycling towns was rolled out and local transport authorities applied to be a cycling town. And Bristol and South Gloucestershire Council were awarded money to be the first cycling city, and that would encompass all of Greater Bristol. So the first piece of work that we got involved in Bristol was the concept of that personal travel planning. So a team of travel advisors who would undertake conversations with residents of different suburbs of Bristol, which we thought had the greatest propensity to shift some of their car trips to cycling. And then as the programme grew, it was a 2.5-year programme. The following year, those travel advisors broadened out, if you like, their remit of work to be part of a roadshow that also went into employers and businesses to different community events. So it wasn't just residents we're reaching, it was a whole range. And you can see there feedback from a customer, but it was just the sense that we were taking information and opportunity to people rather than having them need to come and proactively engage. So that's me just setting the scene of how these projects came about, how Bristol got started. And I'm very pleased to say that a couple of years on, Lizzie joined us to manage the team and is going to pick up in much more detail what they get up to day to day. Over to Lizzie.
Hello there. Hi, I'm Lizzie, and I live and work in Bristol for Bristol City Council. Next slide, please. So I just thought I'd give a quick summary of, I've been working here for 13 years now, and I started off working on the project when there were many different funding streams. So we would have almost annual changes where we would have a deadline to finish everything by the end of March and make sure that we were following all the rules of the funding stream. I also, very quickly, sorry, I meant to add in that to give a bit of context of Bristol, it's the largest city in the southwest of the UK, has over 500,000 residents. And over the last decade, it has had the third largest population increase of the 12 core cities in the UK. So we've had quite a huge amount of growth. And obviously with that, it being quite an old city, we don't have the ability to build more car infrastructure or roads. So we've really had to focus on sustainable behaviour change, softer measures. So as I said, I joined in 2013. And then most recently, our funding stream changed quite significantly. And this is where most of the change has come within the team. So we received funding, 42 million, to deliver a clean air zone in Bristol city centre. So along with supporting people to move out onto cleaner vehicles, there was also a huge amount of money to promote sustainable transport, which is where my team came in. The funding was so significantly bigger that it meant that we were doing sort of, I don't know, maybe 50, 100 times more than we had done before. So we had to adjust our processes to cope with this expansion. We went online so that people could self-refer rather than just being invited via a travel advisor at an event. And we expanded the team so that we could speak to more people across Bristol. Next slide, please. So the team that I work in is called the Engagement and Active Travel team, and we work in these 4 areas. So we work in businesses, schools, community, and in new developments. There are 28 of us working across the area, and we're targeting life transitions and supporting in infrastructure projects with community consultation and engagement, making sure that all relevant businesses, community groups, places of education are engaged with on those relevant projects. Next slide, please. So as Lisa mentioned, I manage the roadshow team. So we are currently a team of 10. We deliver travel roadshows, which can adapt to any setting. They may be at a community event, or they might be at a conference. They might be in a business foyer. They might also do a presentation to a community group, so we can really adapt to the environment. We also do on-street surveys, which supports infrastructure projects, ensuring that we gather information for them prior to the infrastructure projects. We do residential door knocking, so with new developments, and we do business door knocking, which also is to support infrastructure projects to ensure that businesses are aware of local projects that may affect them. Next slide, please. So one of the things alongside our travel roadshows and engagement that we do is have free active travel offers. So for anybody who lives, works or studies in Bristol, they can apply for one of these. And the majority of people hear about these offers through social media, online or through word of mouth. We have bus, train and car club offers, which are worth between sort of £10 and £50 to encourage people to try those modes. We also run a really big loan bike scheme, which people can try cycling for up to a month. It might be that they are coming back to cycling and they want to try before they buy, or it might be that they're interested in buying an e-bike. So it's just trying to help people to try things out for free before they make decisions. We also offer free bike checks at home or at a bike workshop. So that's aimed at keeping cyclists on their bikes. And we do bike confidence training and accompanied rides. So that's about people who maybe can cycle but don't want to go on the roads because they feel unsafe, or it may be that they're new to the city or have a new route they want to try out, and we can help them with that. Next slide, please. So now moving on to our business offer. So we offer quite a huge range of things to businesses. We hold around 250 in-person events every year in Bristol, speaking to upwards of 5,000 people, which really creates a great network of hundreds of engaged businesses. So the businesses are receiving support from our officers to encourage their employees to commute sustainably, and also to encourage the employees to travel sustainably during business hours, which might come through a free pool bike loan that we can give them, or an e-cargo bike. And then we do challenges as well, just to try and engage employees. And we have a travel to work survey that we do with them so that we can gather data for the businesses on how their employees are traveling and understand better how people are traveling around Bristol. Next slide, please. So yes, we also work in communities. We have some great community grants that have gone out to people. So it's about building the capacity in the community, getting local people to deliver this work within the sustainable transport, as they know best what's needed in their area. So there's just a few examples on the slide. We've had quite a lot of projects around cycling. So the Bikes St George, getting group rides and encouraging people to get out and try out cycling. Step-in Sisters, which is great, getting people out walking, getting to know their local area. And in Windmill Hill City Farm, they applied to have a cycle shelter built and a cycle pump put in there for people who come to visit the farm. Next slide, please. And then we also work in new developments. This is a source of quite a lot of funding for us, because property developers are required, as part of the opportunity to develop a space, to carry out a travel plan on that site once they've built. They can either deliver this themselves or they can pay us to do it. And if they pay us to do it, then the roadshow team will deliver the door knocking element of that engagement with residents or businesses. And this is obviously also a great opportunity, because new developments mean people are new to the area or new to the building, so we can use that to let them know all the sustainable travel options that are local to where they're based. Next slide, please. So one of the growth elements of our team is that we are working closely with Bristol City Council's infrastructure projects around travel and transport. And one of them is around closing streets outside schools. This has been a really great development to make it safer for children and families traveling to and from school, and encouraging them to not drive, essentially. Because the school must already be promoting active travel and have a travel plan, the school is already really engaged prior to the school street being put in. Sorry, just very briefly, a school street is where the school is closed off temporarily at drop-off and pick-up time, so maybe for 45 minutes to an hour. So it's not a full road closure, it's just a temporary road closure at a peak time when there's most children and people around. And this is really worked really well to encourage children and their parents to travel sustainably to and from school. Next slide, please. So yeah, very quickly, we've recently had started some analysis on the data from 23-24, looking at the active travel offers and what's come out of that. So the early analysis suggests that respondents perceive the scheme has influenced their travel behaviour. As you can see, 71% of respondents have agreed that the travel offers have influenced them to use more sustainable transport modes. And I'm not sure we can ask for much more than that. And the bus tickets requests is way out in front in terms of numbers. 65% have reported an increase in bus use, which is great. And this has been combined with quite a number of new bus routes being put in around Bristol, and quite a lot of focus being there. So the two together is really what makes it work. You can't get people onto a bus if the bus route is unreliable or doesn't go where you want it to go. And I also just wanted to share with you some qualitative sort of feedback from our loan bike scheme. This is from Verity. She hadn't cycled for over 10 years and she had an issue with balance from her inner ear. So she came along to us and tried out a number of different bikes before realizing that she could actually cycle on a pedal bike. And so she's free and she can cycle around Bristol, and she was very happy with that. So yeah, that's a summary of what we're working on in Bristol at the moment. Uh, Lisa, you're on mute.
Brilliant prompt, Lizzie. Thank you. To wrap up this kind of look at the UK, Lizzie's spoken a lot about the west of England. And so to just look at a couple of our other urban areas, Transport for Greater Manchester, just to say they have a team who do a lot of the work very similar to what Lizzie has just described. And you can see a list there. They are an active travel team, so primarily focused on walking and cycling. And then Transport for London, which is a little bit different because of the way its relationship works with the boroughs and the London boroughs and deliver more themselves. But they have a TDM team that very much evolved actually from when we hosted the Olympic Games in 2012, and the team was set up to really try and manage, if you like, the background demand, the people who needed to travel around London day to day, whilst we had all these extra visitors in town. But that team now exists and it does target more on when there is planned congestion at the network or short notice unplanned disruption, how they can manage, if you like, that background demand that needs to travel on the market there. There's also, as you can see, a customer marketing and behaviour change area of work that focuses more on making sure that all of the work that Transport for London is doing is considering the customer. So yeah, I didn't want to just leave you with Bristol. We thought we'll just touch very briefly on a couple of the other areas so you can see a bit more about what else happens. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you both. And if you do have any questions, please post them in the chat, and then we'll do a Q&A after Luke gives his presentation. So Luke, I'll turn it over to you.
Great stuff. Thank you. Yeah, big thanks to the A2 Alliance for inviting me to talk today. So really hopeful that it's informative. We'll sort of broaden out from the UK and the example there from Lizzie and Lisa and touch on some examples and some challenges, I guess, across the Middle East and in particular the UAE, some work that we've been doing there. So bit of introduction for myself. So I'm Luke Ward. I'm leading the Middle East business for Liftango. So we are really focused on the sort of design and deployment of shared mobility technologies. So what technologies can we put in to support shared mobility across the cities, across lots of new cities that are being built that perhaps don't yet have the challenges, but they're trying to put the right things in place to support sort of future growth. So a really, really interesting area. So we'll move on to next slide. So there's a quick sort of agenda there, but what I'll do is do a brief overview of Liftango and some of our technology, and then hopefully that gives a little bit of context. Then we'll step through some of the MENA regions, some challenges, some work we've been doing to hopefully try and bring that to life for you. Next slide. So Liftango is pretty clear in terms of a mission. So really, really trying to help organizations and cities unlock sustainable shared mobility solutions. So really focused on how we can have an impact when we deploy, when we design certain services. That comes through right into how we sort of attribute our data and how we use our data as well to help our clients. So we'll come on to that sort of later on in the slide as we go through. Next slide. So we really do have a global footprint. Obviously, my focus around the Middle East. Generally, as a client base, we work across universities, schools, public transit authorities, bus operators, rail operators, and large corporates, all with that same mission. So it's all around how we can improve the transportation. Next slide. And a quick overview of the platform. I don't want to spend too much time here. I could probably speak all day. But really, we do have a suite of different types of technologies, from supporting fixed route type services, bus on demand, as it's known more regionally, but elsewhere, probably demand responsive transport, or sort of paratransit type community transport. So our technology generally is flexible based on a use case and lots of different verticals, but always goes back to that mission around shared trips, around how we can have an impact. Next slide. And again, sorry. Awesome. Okay. So the challenge, I mean, there are some things that we'll highlight that are quite I guess regionally specific. For Middle East, there is a heavy car dependency environment. So a lot of passenger kilometers are traveled by car. And what we're starting to see is in particular where we tag that to large levels of urban development and population growth. That becomes even more difficult to try and challenge, to try and tackle, to try and support a transition into more sustainable modes. We are seeing across the market large scale investment in infrastructure, often where we see highway networks expanded. That comes with inducing the use of more cars. So it really is an environment that provides quite a challenge when it comes to that transition into shared trips. Quite interestingly, what we see as well in many figures and reports is the recognition of shared modes under sort of taxi rides and e-hailing trips. So not something I particularly advocate, but where what it really highlights is back to that sort of single use car trip dependency and how much the network needs to expand. So real challenge there, but there's lots of really good stuff that's been done. So I'm going to start to step through, I guess, some of the further around the barriers, but also some solutions and things that we've been doing. Next slide. So the car dependency challenge. I think one thing to add, and it's not just this region, but there is a lot around the time of year and the climate, where we see sort of 4 or 5 months where perhaps a connection, a first or a last mile, in other environments where that could be an active mode. Would love to see some of Lisa and Lizzie's behavior change on active travel come through into the Middle East. And we are starting to see that stuff. Things like air conditioned corridors that could be used for walking and cycling, which is awesome. But naturally, as a behavior change point, it becomes a real challenge to sort of change that mindset around it's really hot from June to September, so I am just traveling in my car, and then for the rest of the year, my behavior is really stuck. So it does add quite a bit on that side of things. Historically, what we tend to see is fuel prices being relatively affordable, car trips being really affordable. That is starting to change. We over the particular last 3 or 4 years started to see that fuel prices have it increased significantly. I think when I lived in Qatar in 2013, buying water from the shop was more expensive than filling my car. So that's a real challenge where it's genuinely affordable as well. But we are seeing things like toll fees increasing, which is starting to, I guess, enable that shift. Like we would see sort of in the rest of the world. Next slide, please. Oh, next slide, sorry. Oh, I think we maybe one back, unless there's one missing. Oh no, you can go one back. Yeah, here we go. Perfect. Okay. It's a bit delayed on my side, so maybe that's why I'm getting confused with what's on the screen. So, um, yeah, sort of wanted to do a bit of an overview of some of the sort of areas of solutions, I guess, at the moment, and then step into kind of our role that we're trying to play around shared transport, and then pull out a couple of examples for you of some of the work that we've been doing. We're seeing quite an active push at the moment around pricing. So um, on the flip side, so increase in things like fuel, there's increase in things like toll fares that are trying to shift people towards public transport, and then the strategies around how they're sort of focusing on public transport fare reduction as well. So trying to sort of make that balance and help shift some sort of behavior. Network redesign. I mean, if we take the UAE, for example, large rail projects at the moment that are in play. So things through Etihad Rail, which is a large rail program that will run a passenger rail line all the way through the UAE. In fact, across all of GCC eventually. So connects across to Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Gulf countries. But there's a real focus on the network design, so that first and last mile. So putting in that traditional mode that we want patronage on, but how do we get people to and from a station or to and from um, even a fixed route bus? There are things around parking as well. I'll just jump to that one. So where the sort of focuses around how we support where parking is designed in the city. And so can we provide a better access point for public transport over just being able to park directly in the center of a city, for example. And probably the last thing I'll pick up, which will be a bit of a segue into some of the work we're doing, is a real focus on employers um, and large campuses and business parks where we attract this sort of use of private cars on a daily basis through the commute. So probably resonates with the American market as well. Really focusing on how employers can play a role and how planning can support that sort of optimization and focus around shared trips as well. If you want to jump on to the next slide there. Okay, good stuff. Thanks. So, three areas we've been focusing on. So, we've got a number of technologies. The three core technologies. One is around carpooling. So we've worked with local employers at the moment to support how we can transition, I guess, staff from just using their car to sharing their car with other people at work. So what we see there is a real chance to sort of transition almost into public transit or into public transport by getting used to moving away from that sort of reliance on your own car and it being highly convenient is find a way to transition them. Secondly, we've been deploying sort of mostly funded by employers is shuttle type services. So designing where staff live and understanding the data of where they live to provide a more focused private shuttle service that'll either on demand or as fixed is take staff in and out of their offices through a shared, whether that's a shared minivan or a large bus. And then the final area is around the demand responsive, so more of the public transit stuff that we've been working on. A couple of interesting sort of enablers, one in particular in the corporate space, is around the UAE climate law, which was, I think it was May of last year. So what we're starting to see is a requirement around reporting across all scope emissions. So what that's starting to do is push employers to understand some of their data. And the question there is how do you get that data? And that needs some sort of technology, some sort of digital solution, perhaps, to understand how people are commuting, and then building that plan as to how you can reduce that burden from an emissions perspective. And that sort of ties into some of the 2040 and the 2030 plans that we see across UAE and Saudi around the urban planning as well. So that's stuff that's in play and stuff that's obviously further down the track, but that really supports, I guess, the technologies we try and deploy on the ground when there's regulation and there's regional enablers. It obviously makes that much more fluid in terms of us being able to see a level of impact. Next slide, please. So a couple of slides left to talk through some of the work that we've been doing in, I guess, two verticals. One around optimization from a cost perspective and a sustainability perspective. And then another slide, which we'll go on to shortly, around sort of some of the areas we've been working on to support modal shift. The first one here, we worked with a number of large real estate businesses, large corporates that move lots of people. And so one of our, in particular, one of our sort of first projects in the region was trying to optimize the amount of fleet being used. What we saw as sort of a non-digital staff transportation service. So employers moving large staff from site to communities to offices. We saw really good results using our simulation capability. We saw large reductions in fleet and also that travel time for staff. So where we could see actually staff having a better experience using a commuter style service. So that's something I think that for the region where there's lots of different transport verticals, there's not just the public transport realm, there's also large organizations that move 10, 15, 20,000 employers around the UAE, for example. It's very important to keep the front of mind that we find a way to make sure that that's optimal, as large over, I suppose, overutilized fleet still cause that sort of greater congestion as well that we don't want to see on the network. So for us, being really, really successful and something that we've carried on, we've started to do that as well with schools. As a large schools transportation. Probably some of the largest fleet across the UAE in particular is in school transportation. From a bus perspective. So we've been taking a similar model to how we cluster and optimize the number of buses on the network. So at the moment, a recent project with that found about a 10 to 15% reduction in fleet. So across 400, 500 vehicles, it starts to make a real impact of taking vehicles off the road. And then if we want to move on to the next slide, I just want to sort of step into some of the work we've been doing around the modal shift side of things. So for us, we've been working with a number of the public transit authorities to sort of design and implement and test different models to support their existing fixed route buses, but also the sort of expansion of their metro and the future deployment of the fixed rail passenger services that we'll see come in there. There's lots of interesting ways that we've done this. One in particular is utilizing survey data and demand data to design different zones and different routes that have the demand, and test that demand through a simulation process. We've done that in one authority, in one state in the UAE in particular, called Sharjah. So we work with their roads transport authority and designed 7 zones across their city, based on different types of demand and population data. We've started to roll that out. So we've started to bring in a demand responsive feeder service that connects to their fixed route buses. And what we're starting to see over the sort of last 3 or 4 months is an increase in use of that. Still a long way to go. Sort of 7 zones was the initial design. So we're just in the first phase of that. But I guess it's an example of bringing in that process where we sort of use data to help design a service and then deploy that. But probably the other one to highlight is we have been working as well with the Dubai Roads Transport Authority on the regulation and the licensing of their commuter services. So again, using our technology to try and find a way for the RTA to monitor, to manage, and to evaluate commuter trips, but also to provide a better customer experience to sort of increase the use of more public transport commuter services, rather than again back to the heavy car dependency that we see. Okay, and I think we'll just go next slide because I'm just conscious of time as well, and I think this is my last slide here. And some examples, I guess, of the data that we highlight from our services that we find being really important, highlighting carbon reporting at the top. So with our services, what we try and do is bring forward that sort of social sustainability impact. So where CO2 is saved, where there's potential that we can track against private car replacement. In particular for the UAE, that will become important as we're seeing that regulation, the law change from last year. So we will see corporates start to need to report on that. So that leaves us well placed to sort of support that market to do that. And other bits of insight around operational metrics as well. So like anything, when you digitalize in a service, there's some fantastic data that you can get from that. And it's all about how you then use that data to try and understand things like fleet efficiency, which we were able to do on some of that large transport services. And then, of course, from a behavioral insight perspective, we're doing quite a bit of work within our platform to understand how active our user base is, so how they're using the platform, how they're engaged with the platform, and then helping our clients sort of design incentive programs. So that's also a really important element for us. Okay, I'll just pause there because I think that's the last slide from me. And I think I'll hand back to Rob.
Yes, great. Thank you, Luke, and thank you again, Lizzie and Lisa. And as a reminder, if you have any questions, put them into the chat, and I have some that I'd like to ask the panelists as well. But please feel free to post any questions that you may have. So I guess one to kick it off, that to all of you. In the pandemic, obviously there was a lot of remote work, and I'm just curious in what you're seeing in Bristol and your work, Lisa, in the communities you work with at Steer, and then really Luke in the Middle East, of that, how that has played out, or if it's what does that look like now? as far as people commuting versus percentage that are maybe still working remotely. So Lisa, if you want to take that one first.
I can start, and I don't have those percentages in my head, but I can talk in terms of general trends in the UK. We are not back to the levels of commuting we saw before the pandemic. So commuting on our railway system, for example, is not yet back, but we've seen a really significant uplift in leisure trips, which has been fantastic. So there's a lot of thought now about balancing out peak and off-peak travel. As an interesting example, ScotRail has recently piloted no longer having peak fares for people to pay more money to travel in that early morning peak. And after the pilot, they've now removed those altogether, so there's no longer peak fares. So there are definitely lasting impacts. That said, I would say that more recently, there has been a bit more pressure on the return to work. And that seems like it's a sort of constant narrative about employers wanting people back in offices. But we are definitely not back where we were in
Okay.
2019.
Okay. Lizzie, any change in Bristol? Similar?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think, unfortunately for us in Bristol, the car usage is back up to pre-pandemic times. Obviously, initially it did have quite an impact on the numbers and also just on how we could work without being able to do face-to-face engagement. But yeah, I feel also it was an opportunity in Bristol to introduce some more segregated cycling routes, for example. So and they've all stayed in place. So that's a positive change from the pandemic.
Okay, great. But how about Luke?
Yeah, I think for the Middle East, things like the metros seeing a rebound now post COVID, so that's significantly above sort of 2019, even 2020 numbers. There's been quite a push around sort of relocation of corporate offices as well. We've seen quite a bit. So trying to create this sort of 20-minute city view. However, I think in comparison to somewhere like the UK, there is more of a push for people who are in offices. Um, but in fact, they also trialed over the summer, reducing to a 4-day week across most organizations. I think all of the public sector had moved to a 4-day week. So what that actually has started to push is people being in an office for the 4 days, or once when they're back to 5 days now, Friday generally is a working from home day. So I think there's a bit more structure that's back now.
Mhm.
What we've also got is couple that with continued population growth as well. So sort of have to bear that in mind that things like metro numbers are expansive and they are expanding that, but also the population's growing at a considerable rate. So
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think it's similar in the United States with travel patterns are different. They're definitely not the traditional pre-pandemic peak and off-peak hours and it varies per industry, I feel, and whether it's 4 days, 5 days, how much remote work, but it's definitely more corporate have leaned towards in person coming back in person. I feel that has been a big driver. But okay.
mm.
So Lisa, you have programs that you started a while ago. You had major events that have occurred since then. So are there any key lessons that you could share if communities are looking to make investment in TDM and travel behavior from your experience? You're on mute, Lisa. So
Twice in one session. Um, I think I would always think about starting with understanding the people you want to influence. It's I go to the example of these days we're building a lot of infrastructure, and that's great. So we're putting in some new infrastructure. Who is cycling infrastructure, take for example? Who is it we really think might use that, and how are we going to reach them to tell them about the opportunity to use the new infrastructure? And I just feel that's probably what I say most at the start of many projects is let's really think about who our potential future target users are that we want, and how is it we're going to reach them and influence them.
No, that's great. Yeah, I know London's had a big growth in bicycle infrastructure, correct?
Huge,
Yeah.
absolutely huge. And I think what we've seen there, and actually they talked about it in Bristol when Bristol was a cycling city, is changing the culture, isn't it? It's making it not unusual to ride your bike. Now we have
Mhm.
all these huge cycle superhighways, segregated cycle parking, and I have to cross those to get to the office in the morning, and I
Mm.
stand there and wait quite a long time for all the cyclists to whiz
Mm.
by till there's a chance for me to cycle to cross the street. And I think it's been phenomenal, but it's now just very acceptable. It's very normal to ride your bike to work.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Wow, that's great. Um, Lizzie, you mentioned the schools and closing the roads in front of the schools for those periods of time. How do most children get to school in Bristol?
Yeah, so the school streets are currently all for primary school. So that's so 11 and under.
Okay.
Um, and the majority of those children are traveling by walking or cycling or scooting, wheeling, walking or wheeling. Yeah, so that is the majority, but there are still people who do drive. And it is also like Lisa mentioned about culture. So certain areas of Bristol, it is less common to cycle, for example. So then there's a bit more work that has to happen around that school to encourage, and it also would also depend on what infrastructure is already there because it needs to be safe. The whole journey needs to be safe all the way to school. So yes, but we do have quite a high portion of people walking and cycling. I don't have the exact figures, but
No,
especially if
it's
it's
great.
yeah,
Um, I think in the United States, there's been a shift in the past maybe 30, 40 years where children used to walk and
yeah,
bike to
you do.
school, and then there was a shift to so many parents drive the
Yeah,
children to
yeah,
school, and
yeah.
we're working to try to slowly peel that back.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so with the primary schools, they tend to have an area of only about sort of 500 meters in terms of the catchment area, so where you
Mm,
can apply from. So these kids are living very close to these schools.
okay.
Where there's good urban density, there's not, and people live that close to school, you get a much
Okay.
higher number of
Okay.
walkers.
Great. Well, that's a great program. Um, And then Luke, I think it's probably our last question. So thinking about the Middle East and it being a growth area, population-wise, and just many, as you mentioned, new cities and towns, and thinking about when China grew from a kind of cycling culture, they went to the kind of highway culture, and then realized that that wasn't sustainable, and then really made massive investments in public transit um, and I know you have the heat issue is a major challenge for people to cycle or to take public transit. You meant to reference that. So do you see on demand or carpooling as the major opportunity to make those kind of last mile connections to the metro lines?
Yeah, I think there's a real emphasis on that type of technology. I think generally as a population, it's very digital. It's if we take Dubai as the main example here, lots of things accessed by an app by your phone instantly. Um, and so, yeah, creating an environment where we can protect that first and last mile and support the investment in things like the large passenger rail that's going in, expansions to metro, etc., is super critical. I think it will take some time. I think there's a challenge around, and for me, there's still a question around subsidy model. What you generally find is the market's given the chance to try and take all risk, take all ownership, and take all reward. But actually, when you're trying to transition of market and transition of service, that there needs to be some, in my view, some sort of seeding, some sort of support to allow the private sector to pick up such services. But we'll see. Other parts of the region are doing it slightly different. I think is to see a slightly different approach in places like Saudi Arabia that will be investing in long and sort of the deployment of services rather than necessarily having subsidy-free type services. Long-winded answer, but the short summary there is yeah, it really needs to be a focus around that first and last mile component.
Yeah, unique challenges that we all have, but then similar challenges. And I think that's what's so important about, learning as much
Mhm.
as we all can from each other. So we're not trying to tackle these issues and challenges in a silo. So, I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank actually in particular Steer and Liftango and our speakers, Lizzie, Lisa, Luke for joining us. And, as we continue this conversation, hopefully you can join us in Nashville, Tennessee in November. And if not, we'll, sign up for our emails, go on our website, check out what we're doing, and can't thank you all enough for joining us today, and thank you to our speakers again, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.